The following program contains shocking amounts of wit. If you suffer from dim-wittedness, this show might not be right for you. Check with your mortician.
Standing for truth in the four corners of America. Fighting for justice on the frontiers of the culture wars. And turning resistance into an art form. The only TV host arrested more times than Mahatma Gandhi, Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, your servant Randall. Fraud? I don't think so. I'm as real as that bad boy. Oh, yeah. Oh. Welcome to the program, friend. Today is day 3 in a trilogy of truth. I like that. Where we talk with you about how we got into this mess and what we need to do to get out of it. And yea, verily, how our Democrat and our Republican treacherous leaders are responsible for the mess that we are in. And so, today's program brought to you in part by the Democratic National Committee, taking us off a cliff at 100 miles an hour. And by the Republican National Committee, taking us over the cliff at 80 miles an hour. Wow, that's reform. I'll be right back after a quick word from my friend, Joey the Hammer.
If you walk into a man's house and you steal half of his money, well, you might end up in here with me. But if you're in the government and you hyperinflate the dollar, you take half of a man's wealth, overnight perhaps, but no one charges you with a crime. That's why my father always said to me, son, if you're going to be a wise guy, go into government. It's the ultimate in organized crime.
Hello, friend. There's a passage in the Proverbs that says, when the wicked flourish, it is so that they might be destroyed forever. Actually, I believe that's in the Psalms, now that I think about it. There's another passage in the Psalms that says, shall the throne that frames mischief by decree, or that frames evil by decree, be allied with thee, be allied with God? No. When a government is involved in things that are intrinsically evil, it is on a path of self-destruction. It is going to perish. Now, the tragedy is, as we see in the history of the world, there have been times where evil governments collapsed and were replaced, at least for a season, by something even worse. America has been ruled by judicial and political tyrants, not all of them, but many of them, for the better part of my lifetime. And this horrifying dance with the devil is going to come crashing down. There's going to be an ash heap. The only question is, who's going to be left standing on the ash heap? And will what comes after this coming ash heap be worse or better? More just or more unjust? When the Roman Empire collapsed, it was the church that was left standing on the ashes. When the Byzantine Empire collapsed, it was Islam. It was the heel of Muhammad that was on the neck of the church in the Byzantine Empire. When England all but collapsed, it was Winston Churchill that stood, the last lion, as William Manchester called him. When the Weimar Republic collapsed, it was Adolf Hitler and his Nazi thugs that were left standing. So, we're going to have an ash heap, friends. As I've covered in the last 2 days, the price of corn has doubled, the price of wheat has doubled, the price of beef is at an all-time high. Oil is going up, up, up. We don't know where this is going to end economically. We don't know where it's going to end militarily. We just don't know. And I have a hot flash for you. God doesn't fly an American flag in heaven. So, let's talk about the news, and we're going to talk in this show about how to get out of it. You're going to enjoy this program. All right, today's top story. The leadership of the Republican Party in both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate have told President Obama that they will not raise the debt ceiling 1 red cent. Oh, this is awesome news. It's too good to be true. Because it is too good to be true. I'm lying. Don't worry, they're going to raise the debt ceiling. They're going to enslave your children and my children into even more debt. And they're going to tell us while they do it that they've cut the debt. I'm going to go on a quick rabbit trail to give you a quick lesson on how they lie to us. When Boehner says that they've trimmed the debt over 10 years by $6 trillion, he doesn't mean that it's going to go from 14 trillion down to 8 trillion. No, that would actually be trimming the debt. What he means is he's cutting the projected rate of growth. So he's saying instead of the debt being 30 trillion in 10 years, the debt will only be 24 trillion, up 10 trillion from now. So this is the one fantasy land here in Washington, D.C., where you can raise spending and you can increase a debt and at the same time say that you've cut the debt. It's all a lie. All right, let's talk about the coming ash heap and who gets to be left standing on the rubble. Hans Morgenthau, who was many people call him the high priest of realpolitik. Maybe some of you remember the Secretary of State under Richard Nixon. What was his name? Now my mind went blank. Secretary of State? Yes.
Kissinger?
Yes, thank you. Henry Kissinger. He wrote many books on realpolitik. Even people as young and handsome as me have moments where they lose their train of thought. Henry Kissinger was probably the most famous American politician, he and Richard Nixon, on realpolitik. Hans Morgenthau was the philosophical godfather of this school of thought and basically said power is the end matter. He went back to Thucydides and the Peloponnesian Wars. He went back to Machiavelli with the Prince, both of whom in effect said, justice is what the powerful says it is. The end matter is be in power. Nothing else matters as much as power. They were wrong. And they had to go to pagan ideologues to prove their point. Machiavelli and Thucydides. Machiavelli said that if you're too good, if you're too religious, it's a vice. Machiavelli was from hell, as far as I'm concerned, but a brilliant rhetorician, a brilliant orator. So we have people who have lost their way in government. The end of government, the end purpose of government is justice. The protection and preservation of life, liberty, and property, right? Those are its primary duties given by God. God wants government. You can see in Romans chapter 13 that God said that the civil magistrate is the servant of God. God wants civil government to be used to protect life, liberty, and property. But our government is involved in the killing of life. Planned Parenthood, their butcher mills killing hundreds of thousands of babies a year. Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton, resulting in over 50 million dead babies. And the government is protecting the baby killers and putting people like me in jail. Life, liberty, taking away our liberties in how we spend our money, where we spend our money, what land we live on. If you don't pay your land taxes, they'll take your house. They'll take your home. You're not a free man at that point. You're just a serf renting your land. Property, well, they'll take half your chattel goods, half your monetary goods in taxation. God himself only wants 10%. Our government takes close to 50% of our income in taxes. So our government has betrayed its God-ordained purpose of protecting life, liberty, and property, and has become, in many respects, the adversary of life, liberty, and property. But it's unsustainable. This house of cards is going to crash, people. When it does, who is going to be standing on the ash heap? Who's going to get the levers of power at that point? Because there's going to be enough anger to blame the Democrats and the Republicans. Now, I've got to take a break, but before I do, I want to show you something. No one knows what this is. None of the people here, the cameramen, the editors, the magnificent audience. Welcome. Thank you. It's good to have you here. This is history. I hold in my hand a piece of history. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to show you what this is. Now, for those of you who don't know your history, I'll go over this with you when we come back. This is an autograph. Stanley Baldwin. This is an autograph. Do you recognize that? Winston Churchill. Yes. Winston Churchill, March of 1937. When we come back from this break, I will talk to you about March of 1937 and the irony of having these two autographs. They're real, by the way. This is an autograph book that came from a collector in England, Stanley Baldwin and Winston Churchill. I'll tell you the story of how significant this is, and then ask ourselves, who's coming next? Stanley Baldwin, Neville Chamberlain, or Winston Churchill? Don't go.
There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. That explains a lot about why they'll be white.
Moments with Moses. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You shall go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them.
Welcome back to the program, friend. Before we took our break, I showed you this. I'm going to show it one more time. This is an autograph of Stanley Baldwin and Winston Churchill, probably gotten at the same party. Stanley Baldwin was the prime minister in March of 1937. That's when Winston Churchill signed this. So Baldwin being side by side there, this autograph seeker, perhaps was prophetic. Perhaps the person was a Baldwin fan and thought that it was funny to get the prime minister's signature, Stanley Baldwin's, and then to get that old fogey, that washed up former conservative, then went to another party and then came back to the conservative party. Maybe it was somebody who just wanted to mock Churchill. I don't know. Maybe it was somebody with prophetic insight that knew that Stanley Baldwin was a disaster and that Churchill should be the prime minister. I don't know. This I do know. In March of 1937, England was in a crisis. England was struggling for her life and didn't know it. The Germans were arming. The number 1 trading partner with England was Germany. Guess what the number 1 export from England to Germany was? Scrap metal. The Germans were using that scrap metal to build U-boats and warplanes. They were building tanks. They were building the machines of war, and they were going to send all of that metal back to England. Return to sender in V-2 rockets and in Stukas. Well, in March of 1937, and in the time prior to that and after that, Winston Churchill had the courage to say that England was in peril of perishing. People hated him. There were newspapers that said, do not take any columns from Churchill. The BBC at one point during that era actually banned Churchill from giving speeches on the radio. Now, Churchill was a legend in English politics by that time. He had served as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is the number 2 man in England under the Prime Minister, and some people believe even more powerful than the Prime Minister. People thought that Churchill would be Prime Minister long before then, and as it turned out, because he stood for principle and incurred the disfavor of the party in power, his own party, he was not allowed to participate in the government. He was what's called in English politics a backbencher. Churchill, by virtue of the fact that he stood up for the truth, put himself into a political wilderness. But he stood for the truth when the truth was unpopular. Now, listen closely to what I'm going to tell you. We are going to have hell to pay for the dead babies, for the militant homosexual agenda, for the theft of property, for the unthinkable, unsustainable, unfathomable debt. There's going to be hell to pay for all the things that we've done and a dozen other things I haven't even mentioned. When that ash heap happens, who's going to be standing on the ash heap? Are we going to get a Winston Churchill, or are we going to get an Adolf Hitler? Are we going to get good men and women like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry? Or are we going to get stooges and demons like Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin? Well, I submit to you that in part the answer lies with you. Now I'm going to take a break, and when I come back, I'm probably going to be talking to 20 people or under in the whole nation. We're being watched right now in 22 cities, 1 million viewers a week online, and probably I'm talking to 20 people with what I'm about to say when I return. Maybe you're one of the 20. If not, you get to watch free of charge. Don't go away. A nation without a conscience is a nation without a soul. A nation without a soul is a nation that cannot live. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back to the program, friend. As I mentioned before the break, this segment is probably for 20 people. I hope to heaven it's 50. We need new leaders. Now, by definition, a leader is somebody who is out in front. Okay? They're not a part of the mass. They're ahead of the mass, and they're leading it somewhere. They're sounding an alarm, or they're heralding hope, or they're heralding villainy. I mean, Hitler was a leader. Lenin and Stalin were leaders, okay? America is in a crisis of leadership. In my opinion, the greatest need we have right now is for leadership that is anchored in ethics, vision of history and understanding the future, and in courage, okay? Are you one of those 20 people I'm talking to today? Will you run for office and publicly state that we have to end the socialist plantation? That we have to end entitlements? That we have to stop murdering our babies? That homosexual marriage can never be? And that our crimes as a nation against the majesty of heaven could result in America going the way of the Roman Empire? You see, fellow Tea Party activists, fellow pro-lifers, it's easy to have these discussions in our ghetto. People often say to me, don't you want to change hearts? Yes, I do. I want to change the hearts of the just from being hearts of people who are afraid, people who are passive. I want to change those hearts to being the church militant, to being aggressive for the truth. And so my question to you, sir, to you, ma'am, watching me right now, will you please consider running for the United States House or the United States Senate? Will you put yourself and your family and your immediate friends through the ordeal, the fiery trial of running for office? Will you stand on a stage in front of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or the Libertarians or whoever and say with unflinching tones, abortion is murder and we need to make it a criminal act from conception until birth to kill a baby? You mean you want women to go to jail? Yes. Once abortion is made illegal again? Yes. When it is made illegal again, maybe we should deal with taking all the wealth of the baby killers and using it to give psychological care to the women who have been lied to and aborted now, all right? Should homosexual marriage be legal? No. How about civil unions? No. Nothing that pretends to be marriage, because the homosexual act is an inherently evil act. Do we have the courage to say these things? Let's move on to the economic. You mean you want to end Social Security? Yes. The people who are on it now, all right, as a matter of I won't say the word justice because it's not exactly justice, but as a matter of prudence, we might say that if people are on it right now and it's all the money they have, then they're going to have to keep getting their check. Maybe we'll do a means test for other people. Maybe they don't really need it. And then we're going to have to phase it out as quickly and justly as possible. That means people my age, I'm almost 50, that we lose everything we've put in. I'm prepared to say that. I'm prepared to say I'm going to lose every penny of the tens of thousands of dollars that I've paid into Social Security. I'm going to lose it all. And you, sir, who are almost 50, ma'am, you're 40, you're going to lose it all too. Because we've all been had. We've all been lied to, and we deserve this. Oh, you mean you're going to say that you're going to do away with food stamps? Yes. I want to care for the poor. You should too. That's why I give to the poor. Don't fall for the lie that unless the government takes care of us that we won't be cared for. We have family, extended family, neighbors, strangers, soup kitchens, Salvation Army, the Catholic Church. Okay? Let's let government do what it's supposed to do, protect life, liberty, and property, and then we do what we're supposed to do, and I need those 20 people with the guts to say so. If we don't, mark my words, if we do not have a new crop of leaders with the courage to say the truth, we are going to lose this country. And when the ash heap happens, there will be very evil, tyrannical people who get the levers of power in their hands because they're going to make us more promises that they can't keep. I'm going to take a quick break. Don't go away. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will shatter chiefs over the wide earth. Thomas Jefferson said, ridicule is the only weapon which can be used against unintelligible propositions. Friend, the proposition that we can continue this mounting debt, that we can continue killing our babies, that we can continue being the world's policeman where we don't even understand what we're policing, it's ridiculous and deserves to be ridiculed. The question is, to you 20 people, will you run for office? Will you prepare for the coming ash heap so that when all hell breaks loose, people like you get the levers of power in their hands for justice?